Is there anything that ordinary citizens can do about the increasing level of incivility and intolerance, and we're losing free speech? What can we do?
It's hard for individual citizens, especially in a country of 330 million, but I think what a lot of us do, we kind of live in monasteries of the mind. In other words, when things bother us and we feel that they're not subject to political correction, at least quickly, we tune out and drop out. And sometimes that has an effect. If people look at the University of Missouri that went off the rails and really violated free speech and intimidated people, their admissions are down 20%, and they're in financial catastrophe because donors stopped doing it. If, for example, at Claremont or Middlebury, people said, you know what, I'm not going to send my child there, and I don't want to give money to that institution, it would have an enormous effect. Look at, I think some of us who watch sports realize about 5 years ago, we didn't want to get a lecture from a jock about how politically incorrect we were when we just wanted to have a football play analyzed. And yet that's what ESPN had become. And so what happened, we tuned out, we don't watch it. And ESPN is in real trouble. And so I think that's what people can do. I don't believe in organized boycotts, but I do believe that you just have to concentrate on what's positive in your life, and these things that are bothersome, you just don't participate in. And I used to love to go to the movies. Hollywood for me now either makes a bad remake of a work of genius in the 1950s, or I go to Hollywood and I usually find out that there's a race, class, gender agenda, and that some person in those categories is fighting an evil corporation or the United States. And I always think to myself, these are produced, filmed, written, and acted by products of the corporate system who are all fabulously wealthy, and yet they're saying that people like me are somehow culpable. I don't want to watch it, so I would rather stay home and watch a good movie on Turner Classic Movies. I don't go to the movies. I don't watch ESPN. I don't give any money to the University of California, Santa Cruz, where I got my undergraduate degree, or my graduate degree at Stanford University, because I just feel that I work there, but I don't feel I'm a part of the university community. They have values that I don't share. But I don't want to be vocal and obnoxious and lecture them the way they sermonize other people. So I think there's a lot of Americans like that. That's what this election was about. All the polls, the pundits, they thought, how could he have won? I don't know anybody who voted for him, in Pauline Kael fashion. But these people had tuned out. But they did not, they tuned in when it was election time. And that was what was a big tsunami. Nobody thought that they existed. Well, I think what's happened is that Beltway politics, and I mean that in the largest sense of the bureaucracies, the people who staff federal offices, and the media, and the academic world, while they have very small numbers in terms of the percentage of the population, they have enormous cultural influence. And when they fixate on an issue, transgendered restrooms are a civil rights issue. Global warming is occurring, it's caused by man, it can be redressed by radical changes in the capitalist system. When they get these orthodoxies, Black Lives Matter exists because there's an epidemic of police shooting innocent black youth, and you can't question those, and they create a climate of fear that anybody does, and they fixated on Donald Trump. Then people said, I don't believe this, but I understand that if I were to voice something, it's almost like being in Salem, Massachusetts, and saying, I don't believe that she's a witch, but if I say anything, they might go after me. So you just keep quiet. But this time, it wasn't 25% or 30% of the country that kept quiet. It was half the country, and they took their revenge out at the polls. And I think there's going to be more people. Because if Trump were to achieve 3% economic growth, or stabilize the world abroad, or make changes in the tax code that encouraged entrepreneurship, then he would make identity politics secondary, not essential to a person's character. And basically, Trump's message, to the degree you can cipher it, is, I don't really care what color you are, I don't care what gender, I want to make you rich like me. And if we are all doing much better, then we don't have time to bicker about how our appearance appears or seems. So I think in a weird way, it's it's a argument of unity and not diversity in the sense of dividing people.
So how is the erosion of self-government and the evisceration of constitutional government at the heart of what the left is trying to do in America?
Well, I think the left understands that if they were to put their cards out on the table and say, we believe in a huge, deep state, administrative, bureaucratic state that's run by elite experts, people don't want to buy into that. We know where that leads. At best, it leads to Venezuela or Cuba, and at worst, it leads to something like the former Soviet Union. So they can't tell us that. So almost everything that Obama did, the Benghazi mess, the Bo Bergdahl swap, the Iran deal, we were learning about some of the economic, there was always a second story, a backstory to them that he could not be transparent about, because the left believes that because they believe in fraternity, equality, egalitarianism, fairness, and the right believes in liberty and individualism, that therefore they're more noble and that any means necessary are justified in obtaining them. And that means that if Obama wanted to spy on the AP reporters or deal with the IRS in a nefarious way or change the NSA to be a political instrument, it was okay because everybody thought, well, at least the progressives thought, the aim is to make us all equal, and that's noble. So that's the problem with the progressive project. It's against human nature, and it doesn't understand the nature of people, which is unchanging since antiquity, and they don't have a message that is popular, so they have to be deceptive about it.
The left is trying to make Donald Trump into a Nazi, that he's a totalitarian. So in order to justify anything that they do against him, they make him into Hitler. So how do you break through someone's mindset that believes that, Dr. Hanson?
It's very hard, because if you ask the people who say that Trump is a fascist or a Hitler, young people a lot, they don't know who Hitler was. They have no idea of the extent of the genocide. They have no idea what fascism was under Mussolini. And so they just use these terms and they throw them out and they see what sticks. So you're dealing with largely uneducated and ignorant people who are arrogant. It's a fatal combination. And again, the idea is if you just say all, and notice how the Democratic Party is driven by the media, not vice versa. So if Bill Maher or Colbert uses a profanity or an obscenity, then people, whether it's a senator from New York or the head of, they use it. If they feel that having a transgendered restroom is an issue in Hollywood, then they adopt it. And it's very strange that you don't have people in the legislatures or the Democratic think tanks coming up with policies on taxes or housing or labor or foreign policy that drive the discussion. It's almost as if this paralyzed, fragmented Democratic Party says, what does Hollywood think? What does Silicon Valley think? What does Wall Street think? What do celebrities think? And then we're going to follow them. And so they have a lot more influence in a weird way because of television and movies and the universities than their numbers would reflect. But it's an old argument that if you call somebody these terrible names, then you'll settle or split the difference. So you get an argument with somebody and he'll say, Trump is a fascist, he's a Nazi. And you say, no, he's not. Well, don't you at least concede that he's a dictator? And then you say, okay, I'll just stop he's a dictator. And then you've said he's a dictator. So by doing this paranoid style, they're so over the top that they want to settle for 55% of the difference, which leaves Trump as pretty awful. So I think the thing that they're most sensitive to is the argument that you're very ignorant, because the left always feels they're culturally superior. But if you really don't know how Hitler came to power, you don't know how Mussolini, you don't understand what happened in Japan in the 1930s, so you don't know what fascism is. There was a reason that the National Socialist Party had the word socialist in it, and they need to realize that there were elements of National Socialism that included things like vegetarianism, radical environmentalism, radical labor agitation that they don't talk about. But if there is a fascist movement, and I'm not sure there is, but if there is to be a fascist movement, It's comprised of screaming down people on university campuses, blackballing speakers at graduation, disrupting public assemblies, getting on the internet and using profanities and trying to troll people, and being on television and adopting a profanity as sort of a normal vocabulary to excite people. That's the road to fascism.